Divya Soam, who is Hey everyone. Today we are live with Divya Soam, who is full stack developer and solution. So hey Divya Soam, how are you?
Hello, everyone. Um,
Hey.
yeah. Hey, thank you for the introduction. Yeah, please go ahead.
So I guess we can start with the session. If anyone can have any question, they can drop down in the chat box and we can take up at the end and we can start with the session, I guess.
All right. Let me share my screen. Cool. So, hello, everyone. I am Debesum, and today, in this session for Azure Fundamentals, we are going to uh, first go dig in what is cloud computing, when do you need it, and why do you need it at first place. Then we'll learn what is how Microsoft Azure jumps comes into this picture as a cloud provider, and then we'll study about one key concept of Microsoft Azure platform, that is a virtual machine, which is in general the most fundamental or the first thing that you should be comfortable with when you start with your cloud journey. That is a virtual machine. So it's everywhere. Like in Microsoft Azure, it's called Microsoft VM. It's in AWS by the name EC2. It's in GCP by the name Compute Engine. So this is the most fundamental thing that you should be comfortable with, the Microsoft virtual machine. And lastly, the key goal of this session is you all should be able to get an idea how your future projects can be powered by Microsoft Azure. So today we'll make sure that we do all of these three things with a hands-on. Okay. So, and during the session, if you face any kind of doubts, please let me know in the chat. Okay. Can someone move my screen um, to the front here? Yep. Guys, I don't, am I looking at the right stream? This is still scheduled, right? Where are we streaming this? Bye. Guys, let me know once we are good to go. Okay. I have
Devisham, we are live now. You can go. Devisham, we are already live. You can go.
Hello, yeah. Uh, can you share the YouTube link with me so I can keep a track of chat because this one still looks it's not live. The one in the chat. It's not live, right? All right, guys. So we can start. Microsoft Azure Fundamentals. Today's goal would be basically learning the basics of Azure fundamentals. So we'll start with how and what and why is cloud computing? Why do you need cloud computing at the first place? Then we'll go ahead and learn the basics of Microsoft Azure fundamentals, where it comes into the picture as a cloud provider. And then we'll learn about the key or the fundamental concept of Microsoft Azure called a virtual machine. And in general, virtual machine is something you should be familiar with whether or not you're learning about Microsoft Azure. Like virtual machine is the key fundamental concept of literally every cloud provider. It's in Microsoft Azure by the name virtual machine. It's there in AWS by Amazon by the name EC2. It's in Google Cloud Service by the name Compute Engine. It's everywhere. So it's the most basic fundamental thing for every cloud provider. Key service provided by literally every cloud provider. So virtual machine is something we all should be familiar with, and that's what we'll learn today with a hands-on example. And lastly, by the end of the session, probably all of us have drawn some inspiration how our future projects can be powered by Microsoft Azure and how can you best utilize it. So on that note, let's start with what is cloud computing. So imagine that you have a perfectly working piece of code, a software on your system. It works really well on your system, but now you want to make it available to the entire world. You want to make it live for the entire people around the world to use it. So how do you do that? It runs on your system, but your system cannot handle the load of a real world, right? Even if it has millions of users. gigs of RAM, storage, the best capable networking capabilities. A single system still cannot handle that kind of load. What happens if your system fails? What happens if your system does a restart? What happens if the load goes beyond the certain threshold and your computer restarts? Any XYZ thing can happen. What if the computer crashes? What if you need to upgrade your system? And when you upgrade your system, you're actually going to physically dissect the system, and the system has to go uh, into a reboot during that phase. So how do you handle those things? And technically, in cloud native technology, these kinds of events where um, these kinds of physical activities that come with the system are called on-premise updates. So these on-premise systems, but let's say on-premise here means your system. So an on-premise system has a lot of drawbacks more than the kind of advantages that it brings. So let's say your system has a certain configuration, it's working for you today. Tomorrow, your business need increases, the number of clients that you have becomes 10 times. Your system is not going to be able to handle that load, right? And you need to upgrade your system. So you buy the new products that you require. For example, more memory, more RAM, more a better processor. You buy all of these things, but it's expensive for you. And once you buy these things, you need to physically update your system. So during that time, your software goes down. It won't be live for that period of time because it's hosted on your system. So how do you handle these things? Now that is where cloud computing comes into the picture. A through cloud you get virtually unlimited amount of networking capabilities and secured storage, data analytics, everything in one place. So let's see how cloud computing solves that problem. Today you have n number of people, and tomorrow you have 10 times n. Like basically in one day your business just got better. It's now better visible to everyone. So the traffic increases and you want to upgrade your system. Here in cloud, you don't need to bring your system down or service down to update it, because that's what Microsoft, Google, Azure, AWS, they all are doing. They maintain the server for you. You want better system, you just pay for it. You don't have to actually buy the product. You only pay for the amount of time you would be utilizing it. Your resources would be using it, right? So that's with the pay as you go kind of system, you only pay for the amount of time you actually use the resources. And all these resources, updates, network flaws, you don't have to worry about anything. You do not have to worry about the physical entity of the software. You just focus on your software, your scaling, your on-premise updates, maintenance, everything is done by cloud. For example, you require, let's say, double the amount of storage that you currently have. You just subscribe for a better storage plan, and your cloud system will have an access to that without having to reboot your system or physically upgrade the hard disks, etc., etc. And you can imagine of a better scenario. Let's say there is a kind of a catastrophe, and your entire server farm goes down. So does your website goes down? No. You know why? Because all these cloud systems have a distributed storage of data. Let's say you have data stored somewhere. That data has an exact replica all the time in n number of different zones, so that even if one of these zone goes down, your data stays intact. And there are lots of other key principles behind it. There are some key principles behind it. So you don't need to worry about it. Your data remains constant. Your server will always be d- there will be zero downtime for your server. And the best part is you can scale along with your needs. You can scale down when your business needs it. You can scale up when your business flourishes. So those are some of the key advantages of using a cloud native provider. And today we are going to learn about something called a virtual machine with a hands-on example. So a virtual machine is basically, imagine that today you use your system. What if you can actually pay for the amount of time you want to use a remote system? Now that is exactly what a virtual machine does. It Now there is a concept of virtualization here. There is, let's say, a huge server farm somewhere in an XYZ place. From there you can actually allocate a piece of hardware for yourself. Now that will be virtualized for you. Let's say through virtualization you can actually control the amount of cores your processor should have, the amount of storage you should have, and the amount of um, RAM you should have. All those things you can customize each and every detail, even the networking capabilities of your system. You configure everything, and you ask for a virtual system to be allocated. Now that virtual system will be allocated securely for you. You can use it to host your projects. It will be running in the XYZ remote server farm. It will be maintained on premise for you. All you have to worry about the software now. So a virtual machine is basically a headless device that is allocated for you, and you only pay for the amount of time it actually uses the resources. So it's efficient, and you don't have to worry about the um, biggest problem in a server thing, that is the on-premise maintenance. So with that note, let's start with the virtual machine. So what we are going to do today is basically we are going to deploy a project into the virtual machine, and in that way, like it basically all your future projects are going to follow one or same kind of routes to actually go from your local system to the virtual machine. So get started so that all of us are on the same page. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you uh, a GitHub project. You can actually use this project today as a boilerplate to get started, right? So we're going to deploy this project into Microsoft Azure. To get started, I'll share the link with you in the comment section. I hope someone can drop this link in the comment section with everyone. And make sure that you clone the repository into your local system so we all of us are on the same page. And then we move to the next step of actually hosting this project on Microsoft Azure. So first of all, let me show you how to clone this project. Come to your terminal, right? If you're on Windows, it's going to be CMD. If you're on Linux or Mac OS, it's your terminal. So come to your terminal, and there is basically just two lines of command that you need to write. It's going to be git clone and the link that I've just shared with you in the comments. Now hit enter. This is going to basically clone this repository Azure Workshop into your local system. Now, do not worry about the code that is inside it. Today's session is not about programming or making backend servers. Today's session is about assuming that you are a cloud engineer, right? You are given a piece of software, you know its that is in our case today, Microsoft Azure. So we don't need to worry about the code base here, right? What we're going to do is deploy this into Microsoft code base. And let me first show you what actually the code does. All right, never mind. So basically, this is the code base that we will be deploying today into Microsoft Azure. Let me show you what the code actually does. Once you have cloned the repository, and if you have Node.js installed, then you can do this step, or it's optional. Choose to you can skip this. You can even skip this step. I'm basically going to show you what this project actually does. Once we are done creating a virtual machine and deploying the project into Microsoft Azure. So what the project is all about is it's a backend Node.js server which connects to a remote MongoDB database, and it allows you to create an account, and later it shows a list of created accounts. A very simple profiling server, right? So if I go to localhost 8080, register. This is what it looks like. Here you add an email, you add your name, my profile picture. Registration was successful. It will give you a tick. When you see the tick, it means you're successfully registered. And now if you go to explore, you can see that we just registered for it, right? So a very simple server that basically server that basically takes a registration form at the end. So now we are going to Azure. And why do I need to deploy? Because right now it's obviously, otherwise I'm in a great security vulnerability. I have to deploy this. So the first thing that we'll be doing is make sure that all of you that who are attending the session today have a Microsoft Azure account. And let's jump into that. In the meanwhile, I want to make sure that all of us have a Microsoft Azure account, right? Or if you have any doubts based on how the project is working, ask me in the chat, or we'll move with the next step of creating a virtual machine. All right, I hope we are good to go to the next step. So once you've created a Microsoft Azure account, this is where the first page you will be landing in. Choose a student subscription and you're going to get $100 free. Or you can choose to go with GitHub Student Developer Pack. It will again ask you to sign up with GitHub in Microsoft Azure and you're going to get the free credits. So once we are in the home page or the dashboard of Microsoft Azure, here's what we need to go into: virtual machine. Now, once in virtual machine, we are going to create one for ourselves. Let's go ahead and do that. We need to create a virtual machine. Now in here, obviously being students, we need to go with the Azure for Students, and Azure for Students includes the virtual machine provisioning. So you don't need to worry about that. In resource group, I'm going to select Azure Workshop. A resource group is basically a hierarchy that Microsoft Azure allows you to customize, so that all the resources belonging to a single project stay in one place, right? It's like a namespace for your projects, for all your resources. Now we are going to give a name to our virtual machine. Let's say it's Node.js application. So since I'm going to host a Node.js app, that's what I've named my virtual machine. And it's totally up to you. It's just an identifier. Leave all the settings at its default. The image allows you to customize the virtual machine that will be allocated to you. What kind of operating system that does it comes with? So by default, it is Ubuntu Server 20, Ubuntu 20 LTS long-term support. So that's the most default version, that default option to go with, and it's completely okay to go with this system, Ubuntu Server, because Node.js works fine on basically any Ubuntu version. Or you can choose one that you have to go with. For today's session, let's go with Ubuntu Server 20 LTS, right? And leave all the settings at its basic. The size, that is two virtual CPUs, and it has 8 gigabytes of memory, that's your RAM. This setting is important. Make sure that the authentication type is set to SSH public key. Set your username to your own name so that when your system is allocated to you, it has a default user created within itself. By default user, I mean, like in a terminal, when you type who, the command who, you can know what is the default user allocated, or the current user allocated to your system is. So make sure that you put a name or any kind of name that fantasizes you. SSH public key source, set it at generate a new key pair, because I assume none of us have a key pair already to authenticate. And then we give a name to our key pair. You can keep this setting as its default or change it if you want to. Now in inbound ports, make sure HTTPS and HTTP are enabled, because although we are not going to be using these ports, but make sure that these protocols are allowed. Now we go to the next step, that is disks. Inside disk, you can choose one of any these kind of hard disk. The storage is not going to be a problem today, because this project does not utilize the file read write operations. So it won't be a problem. It won't be a problem if we go with any kind of operating system disk type. Although you can get a better performance than SSD, pretty obvious. Now we go to networking. In networking section, we can leave all the settings to its default. We are going to mess with this network settings later, but for now, let's keep it at its default. Just select RDP from here, and yeah, we are good to go from here. Now it's management. You can go through the settings if you want to. These are just some basic admin level properties, diagnostics, and identity, a managed identity if you want to monitor or attach or log data to your system. You can even use Azure AD, that is basically your Azure Active Directory, which allows you to authorize different people to access your virtual machine if this is a group project kind of thing, or if you are in an organization and your team needs to access your machine. Now there are different uh, kind of configurations available to your system. I'm just going to leave it at its default, and we go to the virtual machine advanced section. Here you can custom data through custom data. Let's say there is some particular thing that you want your system to execute the moment it starts up. So you can write a shell script here, and those things will be done the moment your machine is booted every time. Now let's leave the settings as its default, and we can go to the tag section. Here you can give any kind of tag to your machine so that on the dashboard it's visible to you differently. It's just for your convenience. I'm going to give it a tag that is purpose. I'm going to call it Azure Workshop 5 p.m. All right, I'm going to review and create the system. So it's going to take some time to validate the configurations that we have passed. Once you see this green tick, just say create. And now it's going to ask you to download the SSH key pair that we have just generated, right? So we're going to download the private key and create resource. Click on that option. Now this will give you the most important configuration required, the most important secret key that you require to actually access the system remotely. So that just got downloaded, the .pem file, and now you can come back to your home section and wait for the system to be deployed. Right? So the deployment is still in progress. So are there any queries at this point? Please let me know in the chats if there is any kind of query that you have during deployment. We'll make sure we catch up with that. All right, so the resource is deployed, and here we go to the resource. Uh, Now, yep, all right. So here, click on connect and click on SSH and copy this command that is available to you. SSH private key part, the BSOM, that is basically username at the date your public IP, right? So let's copy this and let's go back to our terminal. And in here, we are going to copy the command. And instead of the private key path, we are actually going to pass the path to the file that we have just downloaded, that is node.js app key.pem. Now it's not going to run in the first time. I'll tell you the reason, but let's first see the error when we try to do so. It's in my download folder. It's node.js profile key.pem. Node.js. All right. So initially it will look like it's running, but it will throw up an error that the file is unprotected. Now the reason is basically we have just downloaded the file and it contains a secret credential to SSH into our remote system. Now by unprotected, it means that the file can still be hampered. So let's make this file a read-only file, and only then we would be allowed to use it as an SSH key. To secure your file and make it a read-only so that it cannot be changed later, you need to run a command called chmod and pass it a value of 600. 600 is a value which through which chmod understands that the following key should be that the following file should be made read-only. So let's pass it the address of the file that needs to be made read-only, and that's going to be node.js app.pem, right? So once that is done, let's you can now run the ssh command again, and this will throw you into the inside of the system. And now I am inside. Now this is where my terminal is, the basum at the date node.js app. So now we are inside the Microsoft virtual machine, right? So now we have a machine allocated to us and we are inside it. So how do we get our software here? How do we get our project's source code here? So obviously, we are going to use GitHub for that. Since the project is already hosted on GitHub, I'm just going to go into the link, copy the link, and clone it into the virtual machine. Git clone and the link to the repository. So this will clone the repository here, and now the source code is available to us. Now make sure that now the problem is uh, the runtime environment that is required for this project is Node.js, and Node.js is not installed on your system by default. So to do that, if you go to the README file of the GitHub, you will see there are two commands that are available to you. The first command actually downloads and adds the what do we say? Oh, this is version 15. No, this is wrong. This has to be version 16. My bad. So the first command, what it does for you is actually allocates downloads the binaries that is required for setting up Node.js and add those to your repositories. So let's run the first command, and it will basically download certain Node.js binaries. These are some dependencies that are required to install Node.js, and we need Node.js because that is the runtime of our project that we have to deploy. And then we run the second command, sudo apt install node.js. Now this command is going to install node.js on our virtual machine. Let's give it a minute. All right, so that's done. Now if you check the command node version, you will see that node is now installed. So now the next step is we go into the project folder, that is Azure Workshop. Let's make sure that all our files are present here. Of course they are. And secondly, we are going to do npm CI. npm CI, what npm CI does, it's um, a very basic command which dwells in the Node.js domain. What it does, it will go into the package.json file, get the list of all the libraries that we need to run our project, and it will install that for us in one single command. So we can either use npm CI or just npm install. The difference is npm install will get the latest versions of all the repositories, all the libraries, and npm CI will get the exact version that is mentioned in your file, right? BSON 4.6, crypto 1.1.0.1. So it will install the exact version. And once that is done, we are good to go and start our Node.js server on the remote system. Oops, there is one error. MongoDB is undefined. Another reason is for security. I didn't add my MongoDB ID and password and the remote location of MongoDB into in here. So there needs to be an environment file which basically has these which has a link to my MongoDB database and its ID and password. Now that needs to be created here. So let's create a very basic environment file and edit that. Inside now in here, I'm going to paste my MongoDB connection string, which basically contains my ID password and a link to my remote MongoDB database. So here I'm going to save that with Control plus O, and with Control plus X, you can exit the nano editor. So now if I check the .env file, there is a sorry, now there is a .env file which basically has a link to my remote MongoDB database. Now, once that is done, you are good to go to run the basically start the project. npm start. Now you can see that the MongoDB is defined and the server is running at port 8080. Now, technically, we should be able to use the project, but there is one last thing we need to configure before we can do that. So to see the project on the browser, we need to go back to our Node.js virtual machine dashboard. In here, you can find a public IP address. Now, this is how you access your system, right? Okay, I wanted to copy it. Yeah, so we copy the public IP address and let's go to a new folder. Inside here, we know that the project is running at port 8080 and we want to register because the server takes register as an address. But this URL is not going to work. And there is a reason to it. It needs to be configured differently. So let's see what is the issue. Now, remember when during the networking security, we configured HTTP, HTTPS, RDP, and those configurations. But there is one extra configuration required to enable the server to be accepting requests at port 8080 because right now it doesn't seem to be doing that. So how to do that? Now we need to go into um, yeah, we need to go into go back to your dashboard from there in the resources or go to all resources. In here, look for your network security group. So there you have a network security group and make sure that it is associated to your project. For example, your virtual machine is Node.js app and the network security group is Node.js app NSG. So Node.js app network security group. Go into that particular network security group and these are the inbound rules that are currently configured for your system. In the inbound rules, you can see that there are few columns. One is priority. Let's skip that for now. And then there is names and port. So it is accepting an inbound request at port 22, port 43, 80, and 3389. But our project actually runs on port 8080. So even though internally inside the system, port 8080 is being monitored for any requests, externally that port is blocked. So the request that we are sending to the Node.js application never reaches it at first place. So that is why this link is not working. That is why this link is not working. So we need to edit the inbound security rule and make sure that our requests go into that particular port. And once that is done, the port 8080 is already being monitored internally. So externally, if it is opened, our requests go in and we get our data served. So how to do that? Now in here, in the settings section, you can see there is an inbound security rule section. So let's go to inbound security rule and let's add a new rule. Now, keep the source as any because we don't want to whitelist or blacklist any particular ID. We want all the IPs to be able to access it. So keep the source port ranges and source at default. And let's keep the destination as any because there are different instances inside a resource group which needs to access it. Keep the service as a custom and the destination port is 8080, right? Because we already know that our server runs at port 8080, right? So since it's 8080, our destination port needs to be port 8080 here. And now inside that, you can keep all the settings at its default. Let's give a new name to our application, Node the All right. So here we have our Node.js app port. It runs at port 8080. Protocol is any. It's custom, and it basically accepts requests on port 8080. Right. That's our goal. And initially, port 8080 was the default port that we use for every All right. So now we go to the link that we previously tried to open, and the site could not be reached because of the firewall settings. So now if we restart, refresh the page, you can see that the page is now loading. And yeah, the CSS files are not being rendered here because that would require an extra configuration of going through Azure Data Store. You can skip that for now, but we have our functionality in place. So let's give us a new email. Let's say Optimus Prime, which choose a name that's going to be, let's choose a phone. I'm going to go with my bunny icon. All right. And the name is going to be Optimus Unicorn. And once that's done, we are going to sign up. But what's going wrong with this one? Okay, it sent us a port 200, that is code 200, that is probably our certification registration was successfully done. And here, let's go to the explore section. Has the IB changed, or do we need to restart our project? Okay, first let's test our code base through Postman to make sure that it's up and running. And let's make sure that I have actually set the right rule. Node.js app port. We have any source port is anything. Destination custom action error priority is okay. We are good to go with that. We have a register. All right. So let's first create a repository. Let's create a new user from here. It takes an email. It takes a avatar and your name, right? So avatar is going to be the file that we want to upload as our profile picture. All right. So I have it here, and I'm going to use this particular IP address as my server. Okay, there seems to be something wrong with the remote Microsoft deployment. Although that this is the only configuration that we need to do to make our project live. and it's port 8080. Let's just update the port for now, and let's see if that works for us. And let's install supervisor on top of this to make sure that to make sure that our project is up and running, even if the terminal is not live, right? Now, to do that, there is a particular application called PM2 which supervises your application. So I'm going to exit the SSH once because network connectivity seems to be a problem to me here. I cannot exactly uh, type into the SSH. All right, so for the first things first, we need to go into a super user mode. And here I'm going to clone the repository. Again, it seems to me that we have some permission issue. I'm going to git clone the remote repository once again. I want to make the repository available as a super user instead of a simple user, so that we do not have any permission issues while running our application. I'm going to clone the repository again on our remote system. Okay, git clone. Okay, so once our repository is cloned here, I'm going to go into the root folder of our project, make sure that our files are present, run npm CI to install the dependencies from package.json. And now we are going to install one new package called PM2. It's just a package that is used in Node.js to monitor your cloud deployments, and it will make sure that your project will still be running even if you're not connected to the SSH instance. So it's called npm global install PM2. Sorry, I missed the keyword. Install. All right, so this will get PM2 for us. PM2 is a supervisor that will make sure that our application is running with different processes inside it. All you have to do now is say PM2 start server.js. And this will make sure that our application is running as with a daemon at its back, right? A daemon is basically a root or its parent program that is running its multiple concurrent instances. So now our project seems online, and now let's make sure that it's accessible because previously it wasn't, right? Still seems to be an issue. So let's fetch our public IP from the Azure portal, home, our Node.js app, the IP address. Inside IP address, we need to go to port 8080, register. There seems to be some issue with the port 8080. Let's make sure that we have the right rule again. Let's go to our home section. Let's configure the network security group and let's make sure that port 8080 has HTTP enabled because that's the uh, kind of request that we are sending right now, right? So our service here is going to be HTTP, port 8080, and the destination is going to be our particular application. All right. Node.js app port, it has port 80D enabled, protocol is TCP, and source is any. So the configuration seems fine to me now. Let's exit the virtual system from here and let's try to access it remotely. Well, that seems to be an issue because port 88 is still not working. All right, there seems to be some kind of issue with the particular protocol, and I need to debug it once. But this is basically the key steps that you need to do to move your project to a remote Microsoft virtual machine in Azure specifically. So let's say you have your future project up and working. There are these are the same exact steps that you need to repeat to make it available to Microsoft virtual machine. Now to do that, you have to create a virtual machine, connect to it with an SSH. Once you are inside the system, you need to clone the repository, update the port security firewall to make it go live. And right now, there is some kind of issue because to keep the session easy, what I was doing is I was directly routing the traffic into the particular port. But the way we normally do it, we use a reverse proxy called, and for that, we actually run an Nginx on the front end, and then we route the traffic into our particular port. So that configuration will be quite will require some script to be written. And to avoid that, this process also works fine for development purpose, not for prod, obviously. But there seems to be some kind of issue with its IP because this method normally works to route us into our project. But for some reason, there is some kind of I don't know, maybe a port issue or something because it's tested and it works. But yeah, these are the few key steps that needs to be done. Once your virtual machine is up and running, you need to update the network security group to be accepting connections at that particular port. And once your server is up and running, you can use PM2 to supervise it, and you can exit the remote SSH, and your project will be live and usable by everyone. So if there are any questions, please let me know in the comments. After in progress deployment phase. Um, okay, you need to attach a logger or a monitor to your application, and also make sure that your application writes the log files into some particular destination so that it can be monitored remotely, right? Logging is the first step that one needs to do in order to deploy your when you deploy your software remotely, because you cannot see the console when your project is running remotely. So you need a logger so that when your product fails, you can go back to that timestamp at that particular logs and check why it failed. So there are some ways that you monitor. These are some of the ways that you monitor a remote project, or you can use a logger that actually sends you an alert. For example, New Relic. So I think those are the few things that I can tell you out of from the top of my mind to monitor why your deployment fails. And I hope this session gave you an insight about how Microsoft Azure can power your future projects. You can leverage the computing, networking, security, uh, limitless computing and security that Microsoft Azure brings to your projects. And I hope you deploy some projects onto Azure with the inspiration from today's session. So on that note, if there is any doubt, please let me know. Generally, I have checked the logs. Okay, in that case, you need to use if you are deploying a backend, make sure that you use Nginx or some configuration on front of it. Apache Nginx is the most common configuration that we use. I I might be able to show you how to configure an Nginx if you want to. So basically, an Nginx listens at the port 80 HTTPS port 443, and it routes back the traffic into your Node.js port. So that's how we normally manage traffic routing in prod. So if anyone has any doubts, please let me know in the comment section, or I think on that note, we'll be good to wrap up the session.
Yeah, so anyone if has any doubt can drop it in the comment section and we can take up. We can wait for 2-3 more minutes and then we can have some ideas.
All right.
Okay, so guys, we have a lot of things planned for you. This is Lakshit Pan from Azure Developer Community. So do join our Discord channel. I'm just sharing the link in the chat box. Do join our Discord channel. We have a lot of things planned for you. And on, just let me show you one thing. Okay. Okay. See, we have a Republic Day quiz on 26th of January. So do participate in this. We have swags for 10 amazing winners, and these swags are from Microsoft. So do participate in the event and join our Discord server. We have a lot of amazing things planned for you there, and we have a lot in engaging community there. So okay, so that's it. If anyone is having any doubt, please let us know. Divisam is here to clear your doubts. Otherwise, we can just wrap up the session here. Okay, I guess no one has any doubts, so we are going to wrap up this session. Thank you, guys. Thank you for everything. Thank you for joining, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining in,
Thank you.
everyone. Hope to see you very
Thank you,
much.
everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.